Good morning, I'm Saini at the University of Canberra, speaking with Michelle Grattan in our weekly conversation. Good morning, Michelle.
Hi, Deep.
You've been travelling, Michelle, this time to Adelaide, ahead of the election on the 17th of March there. So this is an important moment for South Australia. Labor is trying to get a fifth term in office. What is the mood among the players there, and what did you pick up there?
The mood is very much that this election is one that's extremely hard to pick. And that's because of the Xenophon factor, of course, a big third player. But it would be surprising if Labor got a fifth term, because that's very long in today's modern politics. That would be 20 years at the end of that term. But nevertheless, I think that many people think it's a very competitive situation, and that the Liberal Party just missed out in the last election, so the same could happen this time. So it's a very open contest. And then,
as you mentioned, Nick Xenophon factor there. He's gone from being a senator and he's contesting there. He's got his new party there, SA Best. There is talk about him possibly holding the balance of power. What are the chances of that, and what would be the implications if that happened?
If that happened, it's not clear what the implications would be, because Nick Xenophon is refusing to say which side he would support. I think he would negotiate, see what he could get out of one side or the other, and that would probably determine where he'd go. But the thing is, he's got a substantial vote. It has fallen from about a third to something over 20%, but how that translates into seats is the big question mark, because it depends whether he can come second, his party can come second in contests and therefore be pushed up via preferences to win the seat, or whether he falls into third place in these contests and therefore it's his preferences that help determine the winner. And at the moment, it's just very unclear how that's going to work out. The other thing that's interesting about him, of course, is that this is a protest vote in substantial part, but it is a protest in the centre. And in that way, it follows a South Australian tradition, really, because the Australian Democrats years ago were very strong in South Australia. It was their sort of spiritual home, as it were, even though their founder came from elsewhere, came from Victoria. But here, unlike Queensland, we're seeing the protest square in the centre of the political spectrum.
Now, another interesting issue that just refuses to go away is the Adani mine, and Bill Shorten has been under scrutiny on that issue. What has he done that has put the spotlight back on not only Adani but on Bill Shorten himself?
He's, of course, divided in his thinking on this between the Batman by-election in Victoria and the wider North Queensland constituency, which will be important in the general election. Also, possibly, he faces a by-election in a Queensland seat, depending how the citizenship issue plays out. So Adani is an issue on which he's really trying to get across these various constituencies. In Batman, there's very strong feeling about the mine, even though it's thousands of kilometres away. The Greens are waging a really active campaign on it, and of course that by-election is between Labor and the Greens. There's no Liberal candidate. So what we've seen with Bill Shorten over the recent weeks is a few adjustments of wording on Adani, adjustments of emphasis about how much he dislikes the mine, but nevertheless, if it stacks up environmentally, if it stacks up commercially, Labor wouldn't go back on contracts. Labor's very aware of the sovereign risk factor. He says all these things, but puts different emphasis on them at different times. Now, we also know that he went up to the Barrier Reef and flew over the Adani area in January, courtesy of the Australian Conservation Foundation, and he gave them a signal that he was really going to toughen policy against the mine, that he was going to say that if things were as they seem now when Labor was in office, it'd go back on giving a licence for it. But his colleagues pushed back hard on that and said that that raised the issue of sovereign risk. So he was stopped going down that path, and he's back to all these balancing factors. So the bottom line of this is that Labor's policy, if it was in government, on Adani is really, I think, quite open, quite a question mark.
These question marks can come back to haunt you when, when you're doing a political tightrope dance like this, and there are two diametrically opposing situations, be they 1,000 kilometers away from each other. Do you have any prediction how it's going to play out in Batman for Bill Shorten and for Labor?
Well, like South Australia, Batman is not able to be picked at this point. But common sense would suggest, would it not, that if you were really, really strongly against the Adani mine and it was a core issue for your vote in Batman, in Victoria, that you'd be already voting Green, where they have a strong policy. So I wonder to what extent Bill Shorten could retrieve any votes on that issue.
Well, thank you, Michelle. We will wait and see what happens on the Saturday week, and this is going to be a very interesting election to watch, even on the national scene.
Thanks, Steve.